Hi, this is our final exam, and the topic is When Cultures Collide, Leading Across Cultures. We will talk about Canada and Venezuela.
Background and history. The groundwork for multicultural Canada was laid more than 30,000 years ago when a diverse range of Aboriginals crossed the land bridge between Siberia and Alaska and settled around Hudson Bay and the western and eastern coasts. They were originally island hunters, but as they moved east across the north, they adapted to coastal conditions and began to hunt seals and walruses. Eventually, more than 700 groups of Inuit were scattered across the north, each one with its distinct customs and language. English and French explorers plied the waters of North America in the 16th century as they sought a northwest passage to lead them to the rich markets of the Orient. Although explorers such as Cabot, Cartier, and Champlain never found a route to China, they found something just as valuable: rich fishing grounds and teeming populations of beaver, fox, and bear, all valued for their furs. Permanent French and English settlements began in the early 1600s and increased throughout the century. During the 19th and early 20th century, many Eastern and Northern Europeans immigrated to Canada in search of a land and freedom. During the same period, large numbers of Chinese and South Asians also came to work as laborers in the mines. Today, Canada is arguably one of the most multicultural countries in the world. In 2000, over 30% of the population were reported as having an ethnic origin other than British or French. Over 60 languages are spoken by more than 70 ethnocultural groups across the country. The Canadian government is very active in protecting this heritage, and multicultural and anti-racist all levels. Ethnic newspapers flourish across Canada. Multicultural radio and television broadcasting thrives. Toronto has a full-time ethnic television station with a large number of programs in Italian, Ukrainian, German, Greek, Portuguese, and Chinese. Canadians of all cultural origins have the opportunity to contribute to the common goals of equality, national unity, social harmony, and economic prosperity. Cultural values. Canadians are ought to be honest, fair, gentle, friendly, easygoing, generous, pioneers, independent, humorous, very low-key, uncomplicated, and tolerant. They have a very big love for family and Mother Nature. They are prudish, often traditional, and internationally impartial. Leadership and status. In English-speaking Canada, leadership statespeople are generally low-key. Not many non-Canadians can remember the name of any Canadian Prime Minister. Canadian managers behave in a subdued manner in comparison with their American counterparts and are expected by their staff to be truthful, trusting, and equal. Though result-oriented, the route to success is governed by common sense rather than aggressive methods. Canadian leaders have big homes and fine cars, but ostentatious behavior is definitely frowned upon.
Space and time. Canada is the world's second largest country. It contains the third of all the world's fresh water. With fewer than 6 people per square mile, it has the lowest population density of any developed country except Australia. Most Canadians, however, live within 50 miles of the US border, and the vast expanses of the north are virtually uninhabited. The personal distance of comfort is 4 feet. Canadians are generally punctual, though the vast expanses of land in the prairies and in the north makes people more relaxed about scheduling and other things. They are not obsessed with the time is money concept. Communication pattern. Canadian English sounds pleasing to most ears, being measured, well-articulated, and lacking the extreme nasal tones of some US accents. French Canadians possess more Gallic fervor, but in fact are more anglicized than they would care to admit and are less roundabout and loquacious than the European French. Listening habits. Canadians are polite listeners and rarely interrupt a sensible speech or presentation. It is, however, a basic tenet of Canadian education that even young people may challenge the percepts of others. Canadian Excel encourages give and take debate. Instruction in schools is less teacher-led and student-directed.
Behavior at meetings and negotiations. Meetings are essentially democratic and everyone is allowed to air their own views. This certain amount of caution is advised, but Canadians of all origins dislike wasting time. Agreement is sought rather than dictated, and negotiations must lead to a clear action plan. Pragmatism is the order of the day. Rhetoric and overly thought talk are not generally appreciated. Humor is always welcome. Manners and taboos. Canada is a very open society, exercising maximum social tolerance. There are consequently few taboos apart from boasting and other forms of ostentation. Canadians possess easy social graces. They are the world's best cocktail partiers. They invite people readily for supper in their homes, where old-fashioned hospitality shows no bounds. Clothing on most occasions is comfortable and tasteful rather than snazzy. How to emphasize with Canadians. One has to mirror to some extent the typical Canadian values of tolerance, calm, reasonableness, and low-key utterances and behavior. Although they are not very nationalistic, they like you to appreciate the uniqueness of their identity and to distinguish them clearly from Americans. They are easy to deal with, and as they are genuinely interested in other countries and are keen of being internationally popular. With French Canadians, empathy is quickly gained by speaking French, if you can. They have sustained their isolation from Ontario and the rest of the country by clinging to the bonds of family, language, and religion.
Venezuela.
Siestas, South America, you're done, you eat lunch. For us, it was, I think we ate lunch at 12, from 12 to 1, but then we would start working back at 1 and there'd nobody be out until, 3 or 4 because you shut it down from 12 to 2 or 3. So, it was kind of hard. We'd try to go find people in their homes at those areas, but, they're taking their siestas, so they're not really wanting to be bothered. But yeah, life is just, it's simple, which I really, really enjoyed. You don't get caught, it seemed like people weren't caught up in too much of the monotony of everyday life. The thing that struck me as a young missionary is I know people struggled with money, like I said, before with jobs, I don't think people were making a ton of money. But it seemed to never really be an issue. People are happy down there, and they're happy because if they can put a meal on the table, and if their family's good, and if they're if they have the gospel in their lives, they seem to be okay. The one thing that struck me is even if I knew a couple was struggling, but they scheduled us for lunch, I would feel so bad, but they would give us whatever they had, to eat, and that's just the kind of people that they are. And so, yeah, just life. I think, people get up, pretty early, have their little breakfast, go do their work, come home, have a huge lunch, spend some family time, go work for a little bit later, and then at night you just kind of relax and hang out. There are a lot of people hang out in town squares and just kind of socialize and walk around. And whatever religion you are, it's usually a big part of your life down there in Venezuela. So whether you're Catholic or LDS or Pentecostal or Jehovah's Witness, that seems to be a big part of your routine, whether you're going to mass or hanging out in the square or going to church. For us it was, Monday night was family home evening. We tried to do a Noche Misional, which is kind of like a mission activity night at the church. So there was always seemed to be something going on, with the ward activities that, people just really loved, to be together. So, when we focus on family baptisms, it was kind of easy because family's huge down there. I mean, you respect your elders, you respect your parents. That's just what you do. If someone, if your elder gets old, they move in with you. So it's not uncommon for a family to live with aunts and uncles and grandparents. You take care of your family. And that's great, and it fit into what we were trying to do as missionaries too. So those Venezuelan values where family just kind of, you stick to your family, was huge. As culture-wise, I think a lot of it stems from those traditional Catholic ideals. You stay together, you watch out for one another, the community watches out for each other. I served in a little city. My second area, Coloncito, was about 13 streets long and about 13 streets wide, and I was there for 4.5 months, so I got to know pretty much everyone in that town. But everybody, is not. I just don't know if it's a cultural thing or if it's a Latin American thing, but it's just, everybody's respectful. You treat everybody with respect. You watch out and care for everyone. You may not be the same religion, but you're usually, it doesn't really matter because most of those people in those towns have known each other forever, for years. The culture of being together, whether it's at lunch or at dinner time, it wasn't uncommon for us as missionaries to go into a house before we shut it down at 9:30 to go to a member's house to check in or see if they had a referral for us at 9 and have, the whole family in there with cousins and aunts and uncles gathered around the table, having food or, just talking, playing, dancing, listening to music. That's huge too, music and dance, and just, I don't know if it's a party culture, but everything seems to be a reason to celebrate or to to have fun. So I love that aspect of culture. Just the way of life is just to be happy. Which is great. So.
Background history. Venezuela is indeed a land of paradoxes. First settled around 13,000 BC by the Yanomami Indians, whose descendants still live in remote isolated pockets without direct contact with the outside world. But Venezuela has another face, which is the most Yankified in South America, with a modern road network and developed infrastructure paid for by the immense oil wealth generated after 1910. Also, Venezuela means Little Venice in Spanish. When the conquistadores sailed into Lake Maracaibo in 1499, they saw local Indians living in rustic thatch houses on stilts above the water. Oil is another Venezuelan paradox. The oil boom enabled a high standard of living unheard of in South America, but agriculture and ranching went into decline, sinking the peasants into ever-increasing poverty. The other paradox is the continent's superhero, Simon Bolivar. His bravery and foresight brought independence to not only to Venezuela, but also to Colombia, Panama, Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia. Unfortunately, he died in poverty. Venezuelans, in fact, suffer more than any other country from the wars of independence, fighting in all the armies that Bolivar led. Unfortunately, one quarter of the country's population died in these conflicts. Venezuela is a country of mixed blood. About 70% of the population is a blend of European, Indian, and African ancestry, or any two of the three. The rest are whites, blacks, and pure blood Indians. Also, Venezuela experienced significant post-World War II immigrations from Europe, mostly from Spain, Italy, and Portugal, until the 1960s when many of them returned home. Values. The Venezuelan values, they are very patriotic, optimistic, loyal, adaptable, well educated. They are also respectful with the family, with the property, and most importantly, with the elderly. By and large, Venezuelans are friendly, lively, and welcoming. However, the oil crisis have brought difficult times with somewhat diminished hospitality, especially in the big cities. Leadership and status. For Venezuelans, wealth counts the most. Venezuelans also accord status to people whom they consider very civilized, such as artists, writers, teachers, doctors, and engineers. Leadership in Venezuela has traditionally been centered around a strong dictator or president. Nepotism is common, and staff are manipulated by a variation of persuasive methods ranging from benign paternalism to outright exploitation and coercion.
Space and time. Venezuelans sit or stand close to their interlocutor and are fairly tactile. For them, punctuality has only relative importance. People arriving late for appointments are not regarded as rude. Wait. Communication pattern. Venezuelans rarely get directly to the point, but rather tend to talk around the subject matter and will rarely tell you what they think. Expressing strong or personal opinions is not considered polite. Body language is overt, with great use of hands and facial expressions. The common language is Spanish, but there are also 25 Indian languages spoken in the country. Listening habits. They are poor at cooperating with authorities or on any external plans that do not correspond to their immediate needs. Consequently, they are not among the best of audiences. Only charismatic speakers can get them to listen for very long, and they must show them they know more than Venezuelans do.
Espérate. Behavior at meetings and negotiations. Business meetings in Venezuela are usually conducted in a pleasant, sociable atmosphere and begin with a lot of small a lot of respect. Maintaining a high level of politeness is essential. Meetings are often preceded or followed by socializing and entertaining. Venezuelans are somewhat unpredictable in the way they conduct meetings and behave in them. One thing is sure, they will talk a lot. There are some Venezuelan aspects that can be disconcerting to other cultures, like low productivity, social envy, not to accept responsibility, lacking in punctuality, not committed to results, poor sense of time, schedules, and agendas. On the other hand, there are many positive aspects of dealing with the Venezuelans, like loyalty, teamwork, warmth, desire to please others, optimism, and adaptability. Manners and taboos. Venezuelans are colorful people. Idealism is rampant, and most people think they have a good grasp of human values. Venezuelans are polite with strangers. When meeting groups, always introduce yourself, to the eldest person first. Taboos include cruelty, lack of consideration for the dignity of others, and any form of rough treatment. How to empathize with Venezuelans. Show an interest in Venezuelan history and know something about Simon Bolivar. Venezuelans are proud of their countries and heritage. You should offer your help frequently when they have business or personal problems. Avoid dampening in their enthusiasm and be compassionate and solicitous in your dealings, especially with those less fortunate than you.
The interpreter has to consider him or herself a cultural mediator. We must learn as much as possible of every culture we work with in order to facilitate mutual understanding and maintain a healthy professional relationship with our employers.
A good interpreter is more than just a skilled linguist. He or she is someone who is willing and able to be a good, compassionate listener. Interpretation situations can be intimidating for non-native speakers, and an interpreter should try to make the experience as comfortable as possible.
Interpreters play a fundamental role as a cultural mediators. Knowing two languages thoroughly is not enough. Interpreters must develop the skills to act as mediators between cultures of different values, traditions, and beliefs, because their work is not only the transmissions of words and content, but also the transmission of knowledge, experiences, and emotions between parties who do not share the same language and culture.
The interpreter, as a cultural mediator, must be aware of the historical background in order to have a better understanding regarding the country's culture and its people nowadays.
The interpreter, as a cultural mediator, has to know how to perform well and take advantage of the space and time in order to avoid any kind of uncomfortability on the side of the target audience. Also, it is important to know and be aware of the communication patterns of the audience to make a good interpreter.
The interpreter, as a cultural mediator, must have historical, social, and cultural knowledge of the language that he or she works with. This includes knowledge of traditions, habits, values, and taboos.
Thank you for watching.